All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us today at Gnomon School in Hollywood for a very special Making of God of War event with Santa Monica Studio. We're hosting our first ever live Twitch stream today, so we're sending out a big hello to everyone joining us on Twitch and live stream as well. Hello. Super excited to be launching our live events on Twitch this month. We've wanted to do it for the longest time, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. So, and also we'd like to send a massive thanks to Sony PlayStation for re-hosting us today, which is pretty insane and why I'm kind of shaking a little bit. So it's a huge honor for us, and yeah, thanks to everyone joining in on Sony's PlayStation channel as well. So good to have you with us. So it's been a busy week with E3 in town this week, but we're excited to keep the party going. Hope you all are too. So today we'll have a deep dive into the making of God of War, which I'm sure, and I'm assuming most of you tonight are already playing, if not finished already. If you haven't finished the game yet, then hopefully we won't be spoiling too much for you, but there will be spoilers, so be careful. If you haven't yet played the game at all, we actually have a PS4 Pro in the gallery, so you'll get a chance to play that later. You'll have to take it in turns. So be sure to stick around for that. And at Gnomon, it's actually the last week of spring term here at Gnomon, so it's an awesome opportunity for us and all our awesome students here to celebrate in style with Santa Monica Studio. So cool. We have a first-class lineup for you tonight featuring 6 amazing artists. So first up, we'll hear about the incredible character rigging and cinematic animation work that went into God of War with lead narrative animator Erica Pinto and lead technical artist and Gnomon alum Axel Grossman. So let's have a round of applause for Erica and Axel. Woo! Thank you. It's always a pleasure for us to have our alumni back at Gnomon, so especially for events like these. So thank you, Axel, for coming home today. We actually have 18 graduates from Gnomon who've worked on God of War, which is seriously impressive. So huge congrats to all of you. If any of you are here, we look forward to catching up with you later. And in part 2, we'll welcome lead environment concept artist Luke Berliner and lead environment artist Nate Stevens, who also happens to be one of our Gnomon instructors, so that's pretty sweet. They'll hit the stage at 5:15, and they'll be talking us through the epic environments in God of War, so yay. Nate actually teaches our environment creation for games class here at Gnomon, so we're thrilled to have him here, finally showcasing his God of War work for us, so super proud of him too. In our third and final part of today's presentations, we'll check out the insanely stunning characters of God of War with lead character artist Raphael Grassetti and lead character concept artist Della Longfish. We've been trying to get these guys here for the longest time, but they're always busy, so we're so glad the game is out so we can get them here. So, and the best part is those here tonight, you get to hang out with these awesome people later at the gallery. So make sure you stick around from that. We'll open the gallery officially at 7:30 p.m. We'll have refreshments, and it'll be fun. Please stick around. We'll also have a ton of Sony Santa Monica, I always say it wrong, Santa Monica Studio. They'll be here later to celebrate with you. And anyone from Santa Monica Studio will have a red wristband, so look out for them. Make sure you tell them you love them, that they're awesome, and that they did an amazing job. So the plan is we're going to kick off shortly the first of our 3 presentations, then we'll take a short 15-minute breather at 5:15. So we'll be changing over here on the stage, and then we'll do the same again at 6:15 for our final guest to take to the stage. During those intermissions, we're raffling swag bags to you all, so hang on to your raffle tickets for those. We do ask that you remain in your seats if possible, just to keep us on schedule. We're on a really tight schedule. We have so much to share with you. If you do need to leave the stage at any point, please leave like a ninja and come just so we can't see you. We're just trying to avoid as much light leakage because it's still light outside, and then the door can be pretty noisy. So we're just trying to keep noise to a minimum. As you can see, tonight's event is sponsored by Lenovo. We haven't turned the light on, so someone can do that in a minute. So big thanks to Lenovo for helping us to bring these free educational events to you from the Gnomon campus. So tonight's presentation is powered by Lenovo and Intel technology, which our students also use here on campus. Also like to give a huge thanks to ArtStation for sponsoring tonight's gallery opening. So for those joining us online, we're so sorry that you won't be able to celebrate with us here in person or check out the beautiful gallery exhibition here in Hollywood. But we do have a heads up for you. So if you head to artstation.com from June 18th, you'll be able to see a week-long God of War art blast. So don't miss that. It's going to be pretty sweet. And anyone here online, if you want to tag us on social media, just use hashtag Gnomon and hashtag God of War, and we'll keep an eye out for all of those comments and mentions. So always love to hear from you. And that's it. We're going to have a huge round of applause, and then we'll kick off with Erica Pinto. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Lynette, and thank you. Like I said, like she mentioned, my name is Erica Pinto, and I'm the lead narrative animator on the God of War team. I'm going to be talking today about the cinematic animation of our game, the production process of creating the cutscenes for our game, some of the challenges that we faced, and our relationship with Axel's tech art team. I'm going to be doing more of a general overview of the entire process, and then Axel will do a deeper dive into the tools we developed. But before we get into all that, I just want to get to know you guys a little better. How many students do we have here today? All right, welcome. Thank you, and I hope you get some good, cool takeaways from here. Do we have any industry vets here this afternoon? Welcome, thank you for coming out. I know some of this may be a little old hat, but hopefully the God of War spin will make things interesting. And how many people here are just God of War fans are here for fun? Awesome, all right, let's have some fun. Can I just say, we are so happy to hear how our story has been resonating with the players and how they've been connecting with the characters. I want to give a huge shout out to our entire narrative team who put in so many countless hours and long nights to create all these crazy cinematics.
Open the door! We need your help!
This is no ordinary illness. The boy's true nature, your true nature, fights within him.
So I'm a man now, like you?
No. We are not men. We are more than that. The responsibility is far greater.
Can you kill something that big?
All right. Thank you. So that was just a small taste of our cinematics from our narrative trailer a little while ago. When we went back to the beginning of this project, we were really thinking about how we were going to reboot this whole franchise, and we had a few main goals in mind for the cinematics team. First off, we had an awesome script penned by Rich Galbert and Matt Sophos, so we really wanted to figure out how we were going to bring that story to life in the most compelling way. We had a vision from our director, Corey Barlog, of really pushing the player immersion through this documentary-style one-shot camera, or oneers, so the animation team had to work very closely with our cinematographer, Doria Razi. And we also wanted to create the highest quality characters and animations to date in any God of War game, so really working closely with Axel's tech art team and Raph's character art team. Finally, we had a pretty small animation team, and we had over 100 cinematics we had to make, so we had to figure out how to work quickly and effectively to get everything done in the time and resources that we had. So we kind of did that by giving the animators different roles. So each animator would be alternately an actor, or a layout artist, a temp set or a prop builder, a stagehand or an editor, also an animator, and a problem solver. So let's kind of break down these different phases of the life cycle. First off, actor. I know what you're thinking. Well, don't you have actors? You have your cast. You've got Chris Judge, you've got Sunny, Danielle, and everybody. Well, before we ever even get to the stage, there's a lot of intricate planning that has to happen. You can't really wing it when you have a oneer. You have to work very carefully with the camera and the actors to create this dance. So the actors, the animators, work with the cinematographer to create a framework for the actors to then weave their performance on top of. Something that looks kind of like this. Now, if this looks like a crazy football play or a complex dance routine, it's because it kind of is. So one-shot cameras aren't very easy, and this is where the acting comes in for the animators, in figuring out the timing and the focus of the scene. It takes a lot to understand how much time it takes for each character to get into position, and where the camera needs to look to catch important details. Even the smallest little gesture of the hand might be something that the camera wants to pick up. So we do all this by really getting into the minds of the characters, understanding the context and the subtext of the scene, finding moments to breathe and show the characters' thought processes. Now, all this intricate planning creates very effective pre-visualization, or previs, for the cast to work their magic once we get to the stage. We had two main methods for creating this dance. The first was live-action reference. On previous projects, we did a lot of our layout in Maya, but with the one-shot camera, that was proving very time-consuming and clunky. So with live action, it was very little setup time. You just grab a couple animators, you grab your cinematographer, and you go and you shoot some footage. It was very quick to do reviews and iterations. We could grab our director, Corey, and say, hey, Corey, look at this video we just shot. He could give notes. We could do an iteration. We could do it even within the same day and keep going. You get a lot of surprising human interactions that you don't always get when you're doing layout by sitting at the computer. Kind of riffing off of each other, seeing how humans just naturally react when you're in front of the camera. Plus, it's just a lot of fun. I mean, you get out of your chair, you get a little exercise, you look a little ridiculous, you confuse your neighbors, it's awesome. So here's a little video of some of our live-action previs and how it related to the final footage in our game. So here you can see we have a couple of our animators, Avi and Dawn, on their knees because the characters they're playing are a lot shorter, and Dory needed to figure out where to place the camera to get the proper eye lines and composition. Here's one of our shots trying to show a vista. Of course, we don't have a mountain in our studio, so that's the game dev area downstairs. This was interesting seeing our real actor, Adam, moved a lot more through the stage to show kind of more the frenetic nature of Sindri versus our live-action previs where Mike was just kind of hovering around our fake dragon there, that blue thing in the back. But I think Thomas and Umberto make pretty good Kratoses. Here, Dory was experimenting with how to move the camera to follow both the axe and the giant tree that was going to fall down, and we built a tree there. And this was actually one of the earliest scenes we shot previs for, so we kind of went all out. We built this giant ogre out of cardboard. That's our animation director, Bruno, there as Kratos. And Dory wanted to try this interesting shot where the camera actually goes in between Kratos and the sun to end up behind them and show the bandits that we're amassing. All right, so that's our live action video. And this worked for most of our scenes, but some scenes were just a lot more complex, and we needed a way to put ourselves into the game space. It took a lot more setup time, but we ended up using rough mocap. We had an internal Vicon system, and we would mark it up and get a virtual camera in the space. And the benefits of this were we could work with the different size characters without getting onto our knees. You could have actual Sindri and Brock and Kratos and the sun working together. You could see the actual sets from the environment artists and props to scale. And that data, even though it's not very good quality, it wasn't really good for final assets. It was great for our previs process, and we could send all that data over to the mocap stage for when we were doing our shoot prep with the cast. So we could get measurements, we could figure out what sets we needed to build, and so forth. And plus, again, this rough mocap data can even be exported and sent to our integrators so they can start getting stuff ready to put it in the game engine and see how that's going to work out before we get our final data back. So here's a video of some of our mocap previs. Here, we shot mocap here because the witch's house is very full of stuff. So we wanted to see what the relationship was between this table and the location of her fireplace and the cauldron that we're sticking the head in. And you can see in the final version, we kind of opened Kratos up more to screen so you could see what he was doing. Here we were experimenting with how to frame very large characters. So we markered up just a piece of cardboard to act as a puppet for this dragon in the background. Got a little carried away. This scene was important to get this shot in the environment of the mountain, so we needed to figure out where exactly to place our characters to get the best shot. Now, working in motion capture, we had a few things we needed to get from tech art. See, our Vicon stage is compatible with Motion Builder, but all of our assets need to go through Maya to get into the game engine, so we needed characters that were compatible with both Maya and Mobu. They also gave us a tool that was very easy to transfer our data from Motion Builder into Maya onto our internal rigs. And Axel will go more into detail about that later. So for the epic scenes where you couldn't really do stunts with the actors and throw them down pits and stuff, we went back to traditional Maya layout where you're just animating the characters by hand. And here's a couple of examples of that. You can see here how we really tweaked the framing and the pose of the snake to make him look more epic in the final version.
Stay calm, boy.
This is great!
So, when we're working in live action and in motion capture, we need some props and things to interact with, so we'll often build our own temporary props and sets using whatever we have. Like you saw the cardboard ogre, we've got our tree, we've got this cardboard deer over here. And for Mimir's head, we even added some markers here so you could put it into Motion Builder. Awesome. Also, whenever we needed to shoot, before the final props were ready, we would sometimes build these temporary gray mesh props and hand them over to Axel's team to rig them up really quick so we could use them in our previs. Usually it's just really quick gray circles and stuff, but it looks like someone spent a little more time here building that pork chop for pork chop. You put some shaders and things on there. All right, once everything's done and the previs is shot and approved, we send everything over to the stage. And now, what can an animator do while they're on stage as a stagehand? First of all, you can help the crew get set up on tech day. You've sent them all your data. You can help them take measurements. You can really explain to them what sets you need to be built. Once the shoot day is happening, you can share this previs with the actors, show them the videos, kind of talk about the choreography after they've read through the scripts with the writers. You can practice your transitions and start and end poses with them. Like I mentioned, we're using oneers, so you really have to nail those start and end poses for Kratos is starting from standing, or you're starting from kneeling, or whatever, so that there's not a lot of discontinuity between the gameplay and the cinematic. You can also stand in for some non-essential characters. I mean, not really getting in the mocap suits or anything, but just having something for the actors to play off of. Really, the animators know their scene the best. You've been sitting with it for weeks, you've been staring at it, you know all the pieces, so it's good to just have someone like you on the stage to check for continuity and make sure all the pieces are coming together. Here's some examples of us standing in as non-essential characters. Here I'm playing a dead body. And Corey's directive was, put some resistance on those arrows, so Cindy really has to pull them out. This is actually a scene that didn't make it into our final game, where you're in the Lake of Alfheim and they encounter a creature in the water while they're in the boat. And here I am as the creature.
Sit down.
Now here I'd like to talk a little bit about multiple motion capture spaces. This was a scene that had the snake in it, but obviously we can't build a full-size snake. So we've got me over here with a little markered up piece of foam representing the snake as kind of a puppet. And the actors here and the stagehands need a lot of space for the boat, so they've kind of pushed me off over to the side. And then in Motion Builder, we're realigning this snake so that it lines up with the actors on the screen. You can see everything looks correct in the frame for Dory's camera. And then we've got Bruno over here with a little plastic pole so the actors know where to look.
Is it speaking?
It's the world serpent!
All right, once everything is shot and the data comes back to us, it is now time for editing. And now I know what you're thinking, editing, it's all one shot, you don't need to edit, right? Well, there's a few main reasons why you would need to edit a single shot. First of all, some of our environments were just too large and the characters are traversing so much space that it just doesn't fit within our mocap stage. So we'll have to shoot it in a couple different takes and then merge it all together. Sometimes there's mistakes on set, mistakes happen. You'll get a take that's almost perfect except for that one spot, so you'll shoot another take and then you'll have to merge those together afterwards. Sometimes there's script rewrites, or during a play test, a player might not understand what's going on, so you need to do an insert to kind of clarify what's going on in the scene. Also, timing passes if you get the final data and it's a little too long, or you need to have more breathing space for certain areas, you might add some timing. So how and when to edit a oneer? We did everything in Motion Builder with the story tool. We're doing rough edits. And there's kind of an art to finding the ideal point for your edit. You're really looking for the ideal character position and pose where they blend together most easily. And also with the camera position, I mean, with the oneer, you don't want the camera to be over here and then suddenly lerp over here across the takes. It's a bonus if your characters are off screen, you don't have to worry about blending anything. But if they are on screen, you then go into more refinement using your animation layers and constraints. Really, when you're looking for what the best take is to use, you're looking for everything that has the best blends. It's not always the best performance from the actors, although ideally it is, but you're really looking for what's going to make that oneer really sell. So here's kind of an example of our story tool here. You can see we have Freya and our camera have the same blend points, so we found a good spot for them to go together. Kratos has something a little later, so probably found a good pose around here where he could blend. And then the sun is really off screen all the way up until over here, so that's when we start his take. All right, now we get to animation. We get to do the fun stuff like creatures, and we get to do the not so fun stuff like bandage wrappings, which is really a long IK chain. But it's also just a chance to really push performances, get everything looking really nice. And here's a couple frames, samples of what the animators got to do for fun.
Better look at.
Stay behind me and protect our flank.
Yes, sir!
You probably wouldn't want Chris and Sunny to do that in real life. All right, while we're animating, we're often working with tech art, so we need some tools from them. They provided us this character manager, which made it really easy to have access to every character in our cast, all of their weapons and props, and make it very easy to import into our scenes. We used a new fax rig for faces to get really subtle motion using different muscle groups, and Axel will dive deeper into that in his part of the presentation. Also just refining and troubleshooting rigs if anything goes wrong, if Kratos' head disappears, which did happen, we can say, hey, Axel, can you get Kratos' head back? I can't animate. So speaking of troubleshooting, once your animation's done, your job's not really done because, you know, it's game development and stuff goes wrong in the game. So I could really do a whole talk just about problem solving, all the things that could go wrong with our game, but I'll just give a quick overview of the main ones. In a oneer, it's hard because the scenes are so long to keep track of everything, so characters and audios can go out of sync. If the root joints are just slightly out of position, you might notice that they've drifted over time. Our buttery smooth transitions, we call it. Just, again, we're all one shot going from gameplay into cinematic, so there's no cheating. You can't have any pops or sliding. So there's a lot of work to be done to get everything looking good there. Minigames just have a lot of moving parts and a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong, so just keeping track of all those pieces. IK, collision, and physics are usually turned off during cinematics, but sometimes we have cloth simulation going on, so if you're teleporting a character behind the camera, you need to make sure the cloth isn't warping in front of the camera. Also, a lot of weapon and armor variants in our game, so making the adjustments to Kratos' clavicles if he's got a new armor that's more bulky and it's covering up his face. Also, just being a team player. Again, you know your scene, you know there's lots of moving parts, and it touches almost every department in a game development team, so it's important to just get out of your desk and go talk to these people and make sure that everything's coming together. You kind of own it from start to finish. So let's put it all together. This is a scene in Alfheim we called Enter the Light, and I'll just talk through all the different pieces. It went through pretty much all the phases I just talked about, so let's kind of look at it. We start off with a hand-keyed segment for a stunt where they're falling down a great length of distance. So this was Umberto blocking this out. And you can see down here in the corner, this is the final version. This was an insert with a stunt actor to do kind of the somersault to avoid the rock falling. This was our earliest previs, which was done with live action. You can see we just have an apartment room divider with a light set up behind it to represent the light. This insert we shot because we didn't quite know what the environment was going to be and how the light was going to affect how the temple was restored. So once we kind of knew where all the pillars were and what was lighting up, Dory could go in and shoot where the camera was going to be looking.
Zap.
Back to our early previs, you can see kind of how we're choreographing the dance. We have the sun run up ahead, and then the camera follows after Kratos. We originally had Kratos kneel down so he and the sun were at equal eye lines, but then handing the axe over looked a little awkward. So we ended up jumping in the mocap suits to see how that axe handoff could look.
Oh, you're giving me your axe?
I'm letting you hold my axe. It is not a gift.
Still.
Marker?
Here we have Christopher Judge shooting our minigame portion of the scene. And he shot everything in one take, which was great for continuity, and then Umberto would take that and break it up into pieces, so we would have the button mashing section, we'd have a failure state, we'd have a success state when he actually pushes into the light. And this ending was an addition because when we first shot it, we didn't know what exactly was going to be inside the light. So once everything was figured out and we knew we wanted to have this area where the Asher's pouch was floating away from him and revealing the scenario, that's when we shot this section. And that's really it. That's how everything comes together. And I would like to thank you all for your time, and I'd like to pass it off to Axel for a deeper look.
Alrighty, thank you, Erica. Great stuff, and always a pleasure to support your group in their endeavors. I'm Axel Grossman, as mentioned earlier. I am a character lead tech artist, and now we're going to look at some of the character tech art work that we did here for this project. Before I go into our tools and stuff, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our transition from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4. The prior games were in a comic book style. Kratos was very tall. He was a 9 heads tall character. Physically in the scene, he was 7'6". And just some tech specs on him: 25,000 triangles, 5,700 in the face, and about 340 joints total for the rig. And now we've moved into a more realistic style of characters and proportions, partially to fit the art style, but also it really helps out with all the motion capture work that Erica's doing and her team is doing. As you can see, there's lots of character interactions, and just having that same sort of metric between your game characters and the real world makes things far easier to reconcile with the various mocap groups and just keep things on a straight path. Or else you're dealing with trying to scale up numbers and values, and people are talking different things, and someone's like, oh, but did you scale that value? And it's just unnecessary complications. So moving to realistic proportions was an important part of this project. And also casting two characters that roughly fit the proportions of their in-game characters is also a very important thing, as you have to do less crazy amount of cleanup to make that animation work. And certainly the animation team had enough work on their hands as was. So, and just a little tech spec, we're at now 70,000 triangles for Kratos, 32,000 of those in the face. This doesn't include his armor and weapon upgrades. This is really stripped down body numbers. And there's about 835 joints in his body with 225 sitting in the face. So we almost have the entirety of our old PlayStation 3 Kratos from a memory and kind of tech spec wise in our new Kratos, just his face alone. So here's just a little image of our old Kratos versus our new Kratos at scale. And then if I take these and make them similar heights, you can see those proportional differences a little more clearly. Small head, very comic book style, long legs and arms, and now we're moving into a more natural proportions. Granted, Kratos is still a 6'4"-ish, 250-pound guy, but normal. And then here's a little image of our face topology change from the PlayStation 3 to the PlayStation 4. So you can see that great increase in polygonal density. This is the mesh level that is in the game throughout. There is no cheating or cutting into a cinematic character. Basically, our cinematics are the game. It's all one thing at this point, which is great. And so this is the topology we were using on the game. Now let's look a little bit at the animation tools, some of them at least. I will say that our rigging team did a ton of work on this project. We wrote many tools, so I'm just sharing a couple of the big ticket items with you today. So Motion Builder was a new tool to our studio in the sense that it was a core tool. People had played with it. We knew it was used for motion capture. I think they even used it to some degree on old projects, but it wasn't a core tool. And now moving into having a director of photography, a cinematic director, and all of this mocap data, we really needed to use Motion Builder. But how do we get that Motion Builder data back into Maya? We didn't want to use baked simulation passes in Maya. Maya's kind of slow with a lot of characters and detail, whereas Motion Builder's an app that's really kind of a honed spear. It's made to do one task very well, which is deal with a lot of mocap data and try to play that back in real time. So we needed a way to transfer our data back into Maya so we could do facial work, etc. And we came up with this intermediary rig. We were inspired by Motion Builder and Maya's native one-click interoperability, which allows you to basically just drop pasted data essentially from Motion Builder onto similar joint names or transform names inside Maya. But it's a very one-to-one process and doesn't really take into account that our rig in Maya is completely different than the skeleton inside Motion Builder. So we came up with a cool little trick. Mark Wilhite, one of our character tech artists, wrote this tool called Mobu to Maya. I think we just call it Mobu Maya because it really goes back and forth. So on the right here, what you can see is this is basically our Maya rig broken down into the core transforms that our controllers sit in. So what this does is allows us to constrain the rig into our character on the Motion Builder side. And it's a very stripped down rig. It's just the controller coordinate spaces we need. And this allows us to then just import the animation data straight out of Motion Builder onto our Maya rigs. So I have a little video of this tool in action. It'll make this a little clearer. So we have our Kratos rig. We're out in Maya here, obviously. We got Kratos and the sun. And then if we go back into Motion Builder here, we got some mocap data put onto the sun and Kratos skeletons. They could optionally be using the Mobu specific control rig as well. And then basically this links up between the two apps. It knows what namespaces of the characters have been referenced in both applications, and you make an association that this one goes to this character, this one to that character. And then it's really simple as just saying, do it. And without waiting for huge bake times or importing a skeleton back into Maya and trying to set up a retarget or constrain one rig into another, we can quickly just dump that data back out of Motion Builder straight into Maya. This tool was a huge boon for the team. It really allowed them to do their work. And yeah, it was a great addition to our tools. Erica had mentioned the character manager. This was another part about making our new characters perform as best they could in our various applications, in this case Maya. So for this project, we had to separate our skeleton and our rigs. Prior, our rigs and skeletons were essentially one file, but with the amount of data we're now pushing into Maya, it was really bringing it to its knees. So by separating the rig and the skeleton, we can hot swap in different rig levels, what I called rig LOD levels of detail, so the animator can really choose what they need to be looking at any one time. They're not opening a file with 8 characters, each having half a gig of data. Our face rigs ended up becoming 500 megs. So you can see if you put that across a whole cast and you're just loading that up every time, people are sitting there for a while and maybe you're not making friends. We're all friends. In addition, this system then also allowed us to break the rigs into pieces. So our face rig can be separate from our body rig. Our cloth simulation rigs that we use to key in cloth for specific cinematics or control how it's behaving in the game can also be a separate rig. And if you played any God of War games, one of the big staples of our games is being able to do these awesome decap animation kills. And those are separate rigs that have their own controller structures as well. So this is just a little view of the UI. Essentially here we have a no mesh rig or mesh LOD level, parted mesh, which is just meshes derived from our skinning data, then parented to joints. So this will behave quite fast. Then we can move into a skinned mesh. Now we have a skin cluster on our meshes. And ultimately, if you need to get very specific, you can turn on what we call the deformation mesh level, which then has post-space deformation on the body, which I'll talk about in a second, and the armor, and you can load and face rigs on any one of these levels. In addition, it also allows access to layers, so you get a bunch of layers for a character. It's all in one big list. This kind of allows you to focus in on aspects of a particular character. Okay, for rigging tools, just a few of the things we did. Erica had mentioned we went to fax-based rigs. This has been a kind of the hot topic for facial rigging in games lately. It's something the visual effects industry has been using for a while. It stands for Facial Action Coding System, and it basically breaks down the form changes in the face as they relate to individual or combined muscle actions. The guy who originally conceived of this concept was Dr. Paul Ekman. He's a psychologist. And he was doing it more to determine if people were lying or not, kind of from a psychology, what's their emotional state at any one time. And he termed these muscle movements action units. So if you go out there and look up facts, you might come across various action units. And the visual effects and games communities, we've steered away from things like Action Unit 43, and we'll just call it, I think that's the jaw opener, but I could be wrong, so some facts expert can correct me there. But yeah, so just a little bit on our prior rigs, they were phoneme based, so it was the rig was built around doing AE, IOUs. There was some control to insert more emotion into that speech. Now that we've moved to a muscle-based rig, it may be harder to find the A shape or the E, but you can do those shapes in a stressed state or a very happy state. There's lots of different emotion that can be imparted when you're talking, and the fax-based face muscle rigs allow you to really kind of tailor your rig to the performance. And using performance capture with facial motion capture, we want to retain the actor's performance as much as possible. We partnered with the Sony Visual Arts Services Group. They were very helpful in doing our scan acquisition. They also helped us initially with our fax auditions, which I ended up taking over a bit at the end as they're servicing many groups. And there's also this process of remeshing, which is applying your project topology to scan data. And then the BlendShape rig build is a step that takes a very highly skilled artist who is familiar with this type of work. So I want to call out Victor Germaganov, who put a ton of work into our faces, Raf Grassetti, who kind of set the bar, along with VASG's work on our primary female character, and I may have pushed a few shapes around myself. Here's our fax manager. Essentially, this is a tool I wrote to categorize and catalog all of these face shapes. So I can access various characters here, get into their face directories, and then build the character with various options. And this basically allows the BlendShape artist to work on shapes, load them into these files, and then I can hit a button and rebuild my rig as needed. So we might find a shape that's not playing well, we'd go in, correct it, rebuild the rig, that gets submitted to Perforce, and next time Erica's team opens up an animation, the new rig's there and hopefully alleviating whatever problem they may have had. So here's an early shot of the scan stage down at VASG in San Diego. I think by now they probably have way more cameras than this, and they're always pushing the bar and updating this process, but essentially uses photogrammetry, and here we have Sunny in the scan chair. And basically we get these actors to do individual face poses while in the seat. So here we have our Balder actor, and going through a couple face poses. So on the left here we have a nose wrinkle pose. Then we have a corner puller, which is just the zygomatic muscle, and then a combination of these two actions together. All of this is going to be built into a BlendShape rig. BlendShapes are additive, so if you're pushing a cheek up across two shapes, which this will push a little bit on the up here, the nose will pull a little bit here, You could potentially get some over-added values here when these two shapes activate together, which can look very ugly. And trust me, there's some moments where things just kind of lurch out at you, and it's like, oh, well, rig broke there. So by doing a corrective combination, this guy will dial in when any of these two activate. And here's a multi-compound muscle move. This is really a face, what we call a face open pose. But you can see how the scan data on the left is kind of noisy. There's millions of points in there. There's no coherence between points across scans. Vertex 1053 could be on the forehead in one scan and under the chin on another, so it's not like you can blend or work with this data in any sort of straightforward fashion. So you have to snap your topology, your game topology, onto this mesh. I'm showing this slide here because this slide shows the registration between all these scans. So when you're lining this mesh up against scans, you need to know that you're placing the right areas, because you could creep topology of like this area of the nose that could creep around under the nostril and still look perfectly fine, or loops around the lip could move around. And then you basically have a difference across just even two poses where we get an effect of called swimming, where we see a vertex sliding around up and down the face, kind of along the surface in an unnatural way. And that can distort textures and just lead to be a big mess. So keeping that stuff registered throughout is a challenge in and of itself. I will also mention that UVs, having a standardized UV set is almost crucial, because now we can adjust the topology as we see things change or need to lower resolution in areas or do a specific one-off mesh for a particular character. The UV becomes the basis for your positional transfer data. So you're not relying on 3D space or having the exact same vertex topology. Your UVs now control that. And I'm just showing one of our UV sets here. There's quite a few that we maintain to try to keep things moving forward smoothly. So we do this a few hundred times. These face rigs take a long time. Our game director, was kind of wondering when's the face rig going to be done? And it's like, it's coming. So yeah, tons of work goes into this stuff. These shapes will then be split into some left and rights for what we call bilateral shapes. At the end, our face rigs consisted primarily, they were basically 800 to 1,000 shapes once you created your right and left splits. I know the visual effects world's getting into the thousands, but this is a big jump, and it provides a lot of flexibility. So here's just a little video of the face going through, starting out at some individual face actions, and then we'll move into some combination of muscle groups. And these are all dialing in at 100%, but all of these shapes can mix with each other at varying degrees. And then the neck is also a big thing getting activated as well. So if we spend all this time and effort doing one face, we may not want to have to do it again, or in the case of this troll character, it may be hard to find someone that matches closely to this this look, which is probably a good thing. So being able to transfer your data set that you've created that is now all starting to work properly and blend together onto a different character is a big challenge. So I came up with a facial transfer process that basically uses some key points on the face to determine how I'm going to scale up or down data so that a jaw open or a nose wrinkling action that lifts the lip up will lift the lip up an appropriate relative amount for that particular character. Because if I just straight transfer this with an offset to the troll here, his mouth won't be opening very wide, and it just won't quite look right. Now, granted, there's a lot of cleanup work and additional BlendShape work by Victor past this, but the transfer actually came out pretty solid from the get-go and didn't need too much cleanup. Here's an early video of, this was kind of before we had fully developed our process. So you can see our early registration map, and this was on one of our early kind of test characters. This is something Raph put together, showing how we can move this data onto our Jotun, or our ogre character, rather. And while the methods changed a little bit at the final product, this is still showing kind of conceptually as the same thing, in that we're elevating values in areas and decreasing values in areas. I got more specific and made it multi-axis at the end, so I'm changing values on both the Z, X, and Y, but this shows you some of the stuff we can do. Now these two guys, you know, the ogre character is still fairly humanoid, so while it's difficult, we're still getting good transfers, but we can take this even one step further. We wanted to see just how crazy we can get with this, and I think the video here will show it in a second, or maybe I can just move ahead slightly. Yes, so we can move it onto something even like a snake. As long as we keep this registration area, things still kind of hold up. Granted, it's not perfect, and there'd be a little bit of cleanup work after, but it's good to, you know, push further than you're maybe comfortable with, just to see what happens. Find that area where things might break. So this was pretty cool. Got everyone excited. And here's just a video of our Sun character, Sonny Sulik. This is basically kind of a face ROM test, so I wanted him to go through some various muscle actions. Things aren't going to be perfectly isolated. He's not going to, which is what we want. We want to test the rig under some varying conditions. So at this point, we're starting to see some good continuity between the two. Smiling's a difficult thing to get right in 3D and 2D. Just in general, smiles are a pure emotion that can read wrong very easily. So there's little mesh areas, things we can clean up, but generally the rig is starting to perform fairly well, and this kind of got people excited. And this process is the process of basically we use to do all of our cinematic characters. So how do we get this data into the game engine? So I came up with a method. This is kind of a novel method. Nowadays, the industry is kind of moving into skinning decomposition, and we'll be looking to augment our process going forward with that, which helps determine the weighting values, positions, and et cetera for bones based on training input animations. But this is still a worthwhile technique for getting quick skinning that is good without having to paint the weights yourself. So essentially, I have on the left here a cage mesh where I'm going to generate a vertex for every single, or I'm going to generate a joint for every single vertex on that mesh. I then bind that mesh one-to-one to every joint. So generate a joint here, weight it 100% to that vertex to that joint it generated. Because we're sharing that same UV map across all of our characters, we can then do a spatial transfer onto our game mesh, and the values will interpolate properly across the various vertices in the intermediate areas, basically the areas of flat polygons on the cage mesh. This, along with a few other processes of bringing back values for the head and the mouth bag, etc., allowed it so I didn't have to paint a single weight on any one of our characters' faces. And like I said, we'll be augmenting this or replacing it in the future with skinning decomposition, but it's still a good technique and worthwhile to know about. It can be used for other things, doesn't just have to be used on faces. Then wrinkle maps add that final level of detail. So we had 3 wrinkle maps and 3 blood flow maps. So as the face compresses, areas will get a little bit white as blood gets pushed away from the flesh, and other areas will get redder. We had 27 regions, so we could paint up 27 regions across the face and blend in any one of these 3 maps or blood flow maps. I created this in shader effects, which was a tool available to me in Maya, so I could basically figure out the mathematical node network of it very quickly and easily in a artistic fashion. And then I handed it off to the engine programming team, who are incredible at optimizing things and can smush what you think is a ton of data down into what is really not so much data, and they're pretty amazing stuff. It linearly blends with the base normals and replaces at full 100% activation, but I will be looking into additive normals going forward. So here's a little image of the shader effects node graph, and inside every one of these node graphs is a bigger subgraph. So it looks pretty crazy, but once I walked the engine programmer through it, he got it and was able to compress this thing down. And here's a very early test of our wrinkle maps.
Stupid, fat habit. We want it. We need it.
So I turned off the wrinkles, I turned them back on, you can see the contribution, and then this view will show you as those regions are dialing in across the animation.
Little hobbitses, wicked, tricksy foes.
So the wrinkles just add that tertiary level of detail that the mesh is not going to be able to capture. And even if your mesh was super high resolution, it would then become harder to manage from a BlendShape work perspective. The last thing I'll talk about here, as we're running out of time, is our pose space deformer. This has been a hugely helpful tool in doing our muscle corrections on Kratos as well as our armor. Basically, it's like a set-driven key, except far, far, far more powerful. We can associate any number of driver values with an outputted pose. And this system worked in Maya and in the engine, so it didn't require extra data to be baked out or put on disk. Here's the UI I wrote for it. Essentially, I have some angle measurements between various joints as my driver values, and then I have my poses here that I associate with any state of these driver values. It uses RBF, radial basis functions, which is essentially just a function based on distance. So as you approach a pose, you will, based on a function, you can think of it as a curve, it will interpolate how much of that value you're getting, as well as blend it with multiple values. So the Pythagorean theorem is your way of finding distances. That extends into 3 dimensions and beyond into n dimensions. So, and the formulas here are a little bit abbreviated, and the distances are being pulled from an origin. Essentially, if you're doing this from any 2 points, you'd subtract the components from each and then do the operation. And I included this slide just to try to make it, what I just said, a little bit clearer. So let's say we're in a 2D space. We have 2 drivers, which are x and y values of this locator I have selected here. I've then created poses, which could be some value state, it could be a deformation in a mesh, and then the outer purple ring demonstrates or says how big or important this pose is. So where I'm sitting right now, I'm probably 25% activated off of this pose here. If I start moving my values around, I might start picking up different poses or blends of combinations. So if I moved into this space, I'd be picking up some of this pose, some of this pose. So let's see what that means as far as a character. So here we have our Kratos model. We upped the resolution so that we could start seeing some of this stuff. We also moved away from carving into too many forms on the body, as the skin actually slides and where the triceps flexing on a character might change under deformation. So carving them in through edge loops, while good for lower res stuff, wasn't the direction we were going with this. Here you can see all those joints and get an idea of how we got to 825 for Kratos. Most of that is armor. But we'll focus here on just the clavicle. And right here we just have 3 angle measurements. So we're measuring forward angles, up angles, and back angles. And from those, we can then input a shape. So Raph sculpted these various muscle shapes, and as we're taking on various percentages of these forward, up, back, we're blending in amounts of corrections to the base mesh. And we can turn this stuff off or on, and you can see the various contribution to it. And I'll skip ahead in the sake of time here. So let me go back to a little bit here. So here you can see that we do this across the entire body, so we're measuring all these angles all the time between the arms, the necks, clavicles, wrists, etc. And then we also use it for the armor. I really wanted the armor to feel like it was separate from the body. I didn't want it to be something that was just skinned into the base character and felt a little bit gummy or stretchy. I wanted them to be two kind of distinct things. I wanted the armor to feel like it was actually riding on the surface of the body. And so with the post-space deformer, we can also move joints around just like we move vertices around. And this is a good workflow so that we can not have to create blend shapes for every single one of these armor pieces. So that's what I got for you guys today. I think we have a few minutes for questions for both Erica and myself. So yeah, let's hear them.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica and Axel. So we're going to take 1 or 2 questions. We have 4 minutes. So first one is right here.
And you can also grab me at the gallery reception too. You know, I'm happy to answer questions or go into things more in depth.
Hi, this is for Erica. I wanted to know what the reason you turned IK off in the cinematic scenes for.
Okay. Well, IK was mainly used to keep characters' feet on the ground, but for certain scenes we would need to kind of cheat the characters up to get them in camera frame, so they might actually be floating off the ground, and we wanted to make sure we weren't hyperextending any knees, or vice versa. If they were lower under the ground, we didn't want to shove their knees up, so we would tend to turn that off.
Awesome. Did that answer your question? Yes, awesome. One more question? Hand. Am I being blind? Does no one have their hand up?
I see
Oh,
one
okay.
hand.
There's over here.
A couple of hands.
Who wants to fight? You go, Julian. Let's pass it to Julian.
At what point during production did kind of all this fall together, or are you constantly kind of R&Ding all these innovations to the tech side of things?
Oh, we're always working on this stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain point where you do have to have something working so that production can move forward. You know, so initially, yeah, you're looking at all these techniques, R&Ding things, telling people that it's all going to work out and be great. But at some point, you have to kind of prove to everyone that what you're saying is going to bear fruit. So, yeah, it's a mix of both. Always R&Ding on the side, but always having something that's stable and working for live production.
I think by the time we started doing the final actor shoots, we had the Mobu to Maya tool working pretty well. I mean, there's some troubleshooting, but it was basically in place.
Yeah, and I mean, the animation team also becomes they're our beta testers, really. You know, the software it's not going to be off the shelf initially, or, you know, sometimes ever. So getting their feedback and relying on them as the users of your tool is invaluable.
Okay, awesome. Let's have another round of applause, please.
All right, we good?